Welcome to Philosophy15. I'm Scott Aikin.
And I'm Robert Talisse.
We're the authors of Why We Argue and How We Should, A Guide to Political Disagreement. We're two philosophy professors talking about philosophy, unscripted, for 15 minutes. And this is the second part of our Too Much Democracy piece. And so, Rob, will you remind us what the thesis of the too much democracy view is?
All right, the thesis is that it's possible for there to be too much democracy. And what that means is not an anti-democratic thought. It means that political democracy, with its partisan clashes and its policy debates and all the rest, can succeed, can be practiced well, only if the participants in those political travails share something that is not itself structured by those political categories, conflicts, those partisan agendas, those political profiles. The idea is that properly functioning political democracy rests on or requires a background of civic friendship, and civic friendship can emerge only if democratic citizens have ample occasion and venues where they can engage with each other in shared cooperative endeavors that are not only not structured by their party political allegiances, but endeavors where politics is simply beside the point.
Right. So we ended the last episode with the question: how much does this thought owe to the conservative program in politics that goes back to Burke through Oakeshott and now to Roger Scruton and so on? This program of thinking about the kinds of goods that politics is really in the service of preserving, but itself can't be the thing that preserves them. And again, Oakeshott's great analogy is the conversation, right? That it's a kind of something that needs to be. What politics does is it makes it so that the conversations can happen, but it's not the thing that drives the conversations. And the Burkean thought is also that you need to have these sort of background culture, shared culture, so that you can see each other as neighbors, and in fact, that's a kind of a Scruton thought too, that neighborliness, the virtues of neighborliness are the things that are the bedrock of a healthy political culture, and that if you have it so that you just pay attention to politics, you don't see each other as neighbors, but as vying political agents.
That's right.
And so that's a long-standing, that thought is, and so again, I ended the last thought I had was, it sounds like the conservatives have been thinking a version of this thought for quite a while now. So maybe one question is, how much like this conservative program is it? Is there a difference between it? Is it you just say, look, that thought isn't owned by the conservatives? So
it would certainly be a version of the idea that the thought's not owned by the conservatives. But,
right, good.
From Matthew Arnold and Burke, like that whole tradition of conservative thought, even if you think that the policy proposals that are promoted there are problematic, even if you think they're not sufficient, the conservatives are not sufficiently attuned to various sites of inequality and marginalization, if you have all of this sort of more progressive thinking thought, more progressive thoughts about the policy stuff, it doesn't look like the entire sort of tradition of conservative political thinking has to be expunged.
Good.
It's not an impugning of everything conservatives thought. They got this thing right. Right? There has to be something more important than politics, because whatever politics is, it has, at least part of the story of politics, even in a democracy, is that politics is serving something else.
Yeah.
Right? Now you can see how more traditional conservative thoughts or lines of thought build on this. It's like politics is in the service of something else. What is that? Well, it could be something transcendent, and certain kinds of conservative views, say, are tied with religious views. Right. Say, well, politics is just the human exercise of
attempt to get it right, that's
right. Good. Right, yeah. It can be in the service of something not quite religious, but still transcendent in the sense it's in the service of culture.
Yep.
It's in the service of traditions of moral traditions in the McIntyre sense, right? That politics is the way in which certain kinds of human endeavor, human aspirations are preserved because politics gets kept in its place, right? That it serves those things by not overcoming them or infiltrating them.
So then the question then is, whenever we have so often what's at the core of a good deal of the political disagreements is a culture clash. So what if there's no shared, if you've got a kind of a question about how the culture, we even call them culture wars, right? I mean, so if you don't have that, then what's the sort of the strategy for the background?
So let's make one sort of point first. Like, there's no way. I don't think that there's no way to address the culture wars by just repeatedly calling for bipartisan cooperation.
Right.
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 There's just no way to do that, because if you're at war with somebody, if it really is properly characterized as a war, there's no reason to call for cooperation or for reaching across the aisle. It's like, that's never going to be the solution, right? The solution has to be based in some endeavor to create some commonality that does not have either as part of its content the political stuff,
yes,
nor as its explicit intention the political stuff. So there's a problem here, right? Democracy relies on the availability to citizens of contexts where they can work together, where politics is simply beside the point. But it's not only beside the point and the politics doesn't matter. Politics is beside the point in these endeavors because people aren't aiming at something political when they engage in them.
When they engage in them. That's right. So think about so maybe an analogy between culture clashes and religious conflict then is maybe a good place to go there.
Right. So it's a one thought too many. I mean, it's a one thought too many problem.
Okay.
Like, you can't describe what you're doing when you are trying to forge new venues for civic activity that are not already infected with politics. You can't describe it in that terms without undermining the effort.
Sure. I mean,
once you say, I'm going to do this, I'm trying not to be political here, it's already divided. Yeah, you've slipped on the banana peel.
Put those mouths back, or words back in your mouth.
That's right.
Because you can't, I mean, but look, in this regard, this is the analogy that you had in the piece, which is how similar is democracy to being a friend, or like having fun. You can't say out loud to somebody, hey, let's do this, and hopefully afterwards we'll be friends. That's totally alienating. That's not a thing. Like, if someone said that, it would be like, yeah, I don't know if this is what I want to do with you.
You can't say, let's have fun.
Let's have fun right now.
I mean,
now you can do it with misery.
But know, the surest way to not have fun is to make fun your pursuit. This is a conservative. This is a thought central to
thought.
Good.
Yeah.
Right? You can't go out and have fun under that description.
Yes.
You can go out and get on the roller coaster. You can go out and see the comedy show. You can go out and listen to the musical performance. All of those things might be ways of having fun, but they can't be. And there might even be ways of pursuing fun, but you can't describe them in that way without undermining them.
Right. You have to, whenever you say, did you have fun? Whenever you say yes, then you don't talk about the fun you had. You talked about the thing that happened at the comedy.
That's exactly right.
You talk about that.
And this is the reason why. This is the reason why it's so awful to be a teenager.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
You can't, there's nothing, when you're a teenager, you're mature enough to have an interest in your own experiences and all the rest. You don't have anything to pursue but your own entertainment.
Yeah.
And so consequently,
boredom
everything is boring.
Everything is boring. Right. That's
so
right.
There's an analogy here, though, I think. Is the very unthinkability, or the difficulty with which, the difficulty that we experience when we're trying to articulate the thought that there are things more important than politics, even in a democracy, I think is symptomatic of the infiltration, of the tyranny of democracy, of the ways in which democracy saturated our collective lives.
And so maybe a question here is it unique to democracy? It certainly is. It's certainly something that shows up, and something that maybe democracy is a place where it happens with a sort of a particularly emphatic tone, in the sense in which everybody's supposed to be part of doing the work of ruling and doing the part of deliberating and things like that. But is it unique to democracies? It seems like you can imagine circumstances where, say, for example, in a society that's sort of always committed to a kind of constant revolutions, that you can imagine sort of folks working and doing everything to be vanguardish at all times.
So
is it something unique to democracy?
It's not unique to democracy, but so you can imagine a political order, a monarchy or an aristocracy, where it's actually a virtue of some people, right?
Yes.
It's actually kind of like a civic virtue of some people to just say, I don't care about politics.
Right.
Now, in a democracy, when you go and just say, I don't care about politics, when you're an adult at least, you get a weird reaction. What do you mean you don't care?
Right.
You have to care. You're a citizen.
Right.
Now, the thought then is that,
not just care, but have a view. That's the other.
Well, that's the
other pathology of democracies.
Right. Just go in the grip of a national campaign season. Just say, yeah, I'm not a voter. I don't vote.
I don't vote.
People think that that's in itself, before they know anything about it, they don't even have to know, like, I don't vote. That's criticizable.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter if you say, well, I just don't think about the issues. I don't know anything about the candidates. That's just more cause to blame you, right?
So I think that's right. And so you might say democracies maybe aren't unique in this regard, but democracies are places where you would expect it the most.
Right, and it creates the conditions where it becomes particularly problematic.
Given the norms.
Given what democracy is. It's a mode of self-government. And the thought is that, well, if we are all self-governors, we are equal sharers in the task of self-government, and self-government is a big, big project, it's like this has to be a huge, huge part of our lives. And maybe that much is true. Does it have to be the entirety of our social lives? And that's
democracy
the worry.
And that in some ways the pragmatist tradition is something that has fed this democracy as a form of life. If you have a problem in a democracy, the solution is more democracy. Right. Those kind of calling cards of the pragmatist political tradition look like they exacerbate this.
This is exactly right. And the cure for the evils of democracy is more democracy. That the only problem that there could be with democracy is that you're not doing enough of it. Looks like it is democracy some kind of sui generis good? I mean, no other good has that status in our perception of the moral economy. Yeah. Every good that there is admits, at least every human good, admits of an excess. Yeah, except democracy.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Kind of a good Aristotelian thought, but it's almost like the cloying that comes whenever you have too many sweets or something like that. You can't taste sugar anymore. Like now a candy bar just is waxy to you, right? And you destroyed the good of it. Why? Because you had too much of it.
That's the thought.
That's a thought. It's the kind of the cloying effect.
That's right. So that's why the claim that there could be too much democracy is not an anti-democratic, pro-elitist thought. It's that in order for democracy to be done well as a political mode of interaction and governance and exchange, in order for that stuff to do well, democracy itself needs to establish its own limitations. It needs to say there are ways of individuals engaging with each other socially that are not themselves to be structured by the travails of the politics of the day. And that's what I think we've lost. I think we've lost that. I think it's hard to imagine what that could look like even.
So is the issue then taking politics as an end in itself?
That's got to be part,
and not just an end in itself, but like a kind of a trumping end in itself? It looked like it just...
That seems right. Yeah. And trying to figure out how we can make space for the thought that there are some things that are more important than democracy, and hear that thought as
not anti-democratic,
as a thought that is actually pro-democratic. What it takes to do democracy properly is to cultivate that other stuff. Philosophy 15, folks. Maybe we're going to try one more.
Okay.